when a Jew is presented with this question, why don't you accept Jesus as your Messiah? What does the Jew hear when he hears that question? And in a certain sense, we could divide it into three categories. The first thing the Jew hears is the Jew knows that Christians believe that Jesus is a somehow divine, a deity and worthy of worship. That's the first thing that the Jew hears, that the Christian is demanding that he look towards Jesus as some divine being. That's point number one. Point number two is the Jew hears that the Christian would have him believe that without faith in Jesus there is no atonement for his sins. That will be the second point that the Jew hears in the Christian question. And the third point inherent in the Christian question, why don't you accept Jesus as your Messiah, is that Jesus is somehow the Messiah predicted by the Jewish prophets. The Jewish prophets spoke of a Messiah to come, and Jesus, according to the Christian, came and fulfilled those prophecies.
So, even though this might not be the things running through the Christian's head at the time of him presenting this question to the Jew, why don't you accept Jesus as the Jewish Messiah? But the Jew, when he hears this question or this request to accept Yeshua, to accept Jesus as the Jewish Messiah, these are the things that are going through his mind. Here is a Christian asking me to accept these beliefs. Okay.
Correct. So these are the thoughts that go through a Jew's mind, or if he would be able to articulate it, this is what he would tell you.
Okay.
Now, so why does a Jew reject those claims?
Right.
Now, in short, I would say is that the Jewish people stand in a unique relationship with God. There's an eternal relationship between God and the Jewish people. That relationship is compared to a marriage. The Jewish people are, in a certain sense, married to God, and they understand that it will be a deepest violation of that relationship to direct their devotion towards Jesus or to look towards Jesus as a deity.
So, what you're trying to say, if I understand you correctly, is that it's not so much about a verse or a passage in the Jewish scriptures that intellectually tells a Jew that things don't work out mathematically. This is more of a relationship issue, where a Jew who is in this relationship itself prevents the Jew from entertaining any such thoughts of accepting Jesus on these three levels that you've mentioned, either as deity or as an atoning sacrifice or as the Jewish Messiah promised in the Jewish scriptures.
Yes. In other words, the heart of Judaism, the heart of what it means to be a Jew, is violated by acceptance of Jesus as a deity or Jesus as the Jewish Messiah. We believe, the Jewish people believe, that it would be that every human being stands in a certain relationship with God. Not all exactly the same, but all human beings stand in a certain relationship with God, whether they realize it or not, because God is the creator of every human being, and acceptance of Jesus as a deity or any other deity besides the creator of heaven and earth would be a violation of anyone's relationship with God. But it is especially true with the Jewish relationship with God, the relationship that God shares with the Jewish nation. The relationship that God shares with the Jewish nation is compared to a marriage. In a marriage, each side opens themselves up to the other side in a way that they would never open themselves up to anyone else. So how did God open himself up to the Jewish people? What he did is he, in Deuteronomy 4, verses 30 through 35, Moses points out how the Jewish people have unique standing with God. God did something, he opened himself up to the Jewish people in a way that he never opened himself up to anyone else.
Meaning that they had a unique experience.
They had a unique experience with God. And that unique experience with God was that God took them out of Egypt with signs, wonders, and special miracles. And that God spoke to them from the midst of the fire. And in Deuteronomy 4, verse 35, Moses recaps this whole thing, this whole experience, by saying, unto you it was shown in order that you understand. In other words, certain knowledge, perception, and when I say knowledge, I don't just mean intellectual knowledge, but heart knowledge, a connection to God that was forged with those experiences. And we see throughout scriptures that this relationship is not something that just happened one time, but it's something that's preserved that God preserves in the midst and the hearts of the Jewish people throughout history. It's an eternal relationship. So throughout history, the Jewish people are carrying this unique understanding, or it's not so much a piece of information that other people don't have, but it's a deeper appreciation of that same piece of information that many people have, which is that God is the master of all creation and of all finite existence, and that all existence is totally subservient to God. That knowledge was seared into the hearts of the Jewish people in a special way. And that's how God opened himself up to the Jewish people. And the Jewish people pledged back that their hearts are now going to be given only to God, and it's not going to be given to anyone else in religious devotion. So if you just stop right there, we can see how the Christian claims for Jesus clash right into this relationship that the Jewish people share with God. We're already married. We're already connected to the one who is above all finite existence, and that's to whom our heart is pledged, to the God who took us out of Egypt to reveal himself to our ancestors. And that's it. That's who our hearts belong to. And we're not going to give that same heart to an entity within finite existence, to someone who walked God's earth under God's heaven. In the relationship that the Jewish people understand that they share with God, there is master and servant. There is the one who is the creator and the ultimate giver, and there's the one on the other side which receives and accepts and is dependent upon the ultimate giver. So when we see a man walking earth and walking on God's earth, breathing God's air, so he is a taker. He is one who is on the receiving end of, so he is a subject. He is someone who owes devotion to God. How could you tell me that this is the one to whom we owe devotion to? It's totally misunderstanding, or worse than this, it's skewing the whole relationship issue. It's skewing the whole understanding of the Jewish relationship of finite existence with the creator of all finite existence.
So the one who prays cannot also be the one who is prayed to.
Exactly. In short, the Jewish people stand in a relationship with God. The Jewish people have God pledged himself to the Jewish people, and the Jewish people pledge themselves back to God. The Jewish people, that inherently means that the Jewish people have an understanding of that relationship, and that understanding of that relationship and the heart of that relationship doesn't allow the Jewish people to direct devotion towards one who appears to them as a dependent of God, as someone who requires God to keep him alive.
I think it might be important right now to point out that notwithstanding the fact that a Christian may believe certain things about Jesus, nevertheless, to anybody that lived in the time of Jesus, that would have to all be put into the realm of belief, in contrast to what everybody else was able to see. What people saw in the time of Yeshua, in the time of Jesus, and as far as we're concerned, hearing these reports, is that you have somebody who was born from a woman, and you have somebody who needed oxygen to survive, and you have somebody who is, we're told, who prayed to God and acted on so many levels as somebody who is subservient to God, subservient to the creator of all.
Well, we don't have to get so complicated. On the simple fact that he walked God's earth, that we saw him, the fact that he existed inside God's earth, under God's heaven, on top of God's earth. Jeremiah chapter 10 verse 11 says God that didn't create this heaven and this earth. If someone is inside heaven and earth, he didn't create heaven and earth. So then they should go lost from this heaven and this earth. Meaning to say is that they cannot set themselves up as the masters of heaven and earth. In other words, all we need to see is, we just need to see the fact that he's walking God's earth and he's under God's heaven. That's it. That makes him a subject and not a master.